Donald Trump's attorneys are probably in the throes of a collective panic attack after their malignantly narcissistic and pathologically lying client publicly declared that he'd be happy to testify under oath in any of his criminal trials. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, so I'm not an attorney, but I have watched quite a bit of legal dramas, Law and Order, Boston Legal, of course, my all-time favorite. And I'm familiar enough with the laws, I imagine many of you are, that it's a really bad idea to testify under oath and then lie. That's perjury, and there are pains and penalties associated with perjury that are pretty severe. And Donald Trump, who is a pathologically lying, malignant narcissist, I think the Washington Post, if I remember correctly, documented, I think it's 35 or 36 or 37,000 documented lies told by Trump in his 4 years when he was the sitting president. And yet he has publicly declared during an interview with a conservative talk show host, a radio talk show host, that he would be happy to testify under oath in any of his criminal trials. That's how confident he is. So I want to play the clip. We're going to play many clips and unpack this together because it'll probably never happen for a variety of reasons we'll get into, and I'm sure you're already intuiting, but it's still worth discussing. So here's the clip in question.
Did you direct anyone to move the boxes, Mr. President? Did you tell anyone to move the boxes?
By the way, the boxes, they are, of course, referring to the boxes of national and classified defense information which were found at Mar-a-Lago, which Donald Trump illegally possessed. That's what he's talking about.
Talk about anything. You know why? Because I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I come under the Presidential Records Act. I'm not telling you, every time I talk to you, I have a breaking story. You don't have any story. I come under the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do everything I did.
So again, this is a preamble to when he says, again, with undue, unearned confidence that he'd be happy to testify under oath, which again, he'll never do. The Presidential Records Act does not afford an ex-president or sitting president to do whatever they want with government records. It's just not true. Every major constitutional scholar and expert legal mind on the Presidential Records Act has debunked this for months because Donald Trump has said this for months. The documents most documents, certainly national defense documents, belong to we the people. And the custodian for we the people in terms of these documents are the National Archives. The president is not the government. The president is not a monarch. The president is not king. And Donald Trump is not president. He is the former president. So when the National Archives says you got to give this stuff back, Donald Trump can't say, no, it's mine. His personal journals, perhaps personal tapes, perhaps, as was the case with President Clinton. But national defense information, no, sir, you are not entitled to that. So he is factually wrong. But I just love the petulance. I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. I'm allowed to do everything I did. I'm a big boy. It's just so pathetic. I can't believe that so many millions of people, including people that I know and love, find any sort of strength or maturity in this man. He is so profoundly pathetic. But let's continue.
If you have to go to trial, will you testify in your own defense?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You'll take the stand.
That I look forward to, because that's just like Russia. That's all the fake information from Russia. Remember when the dossier...
And then, of course, he goes on about Russiagate, whatever, goes off on his own tangent. So that was Donald Trump publicly declaring that he would be happy to testify on the stand in his own defense. Now, again, he would be under oath, and there would be the pains and penalties of perjury associated with his statements. I want to play some additional clips here in which with actual attorneys and legal commentators who have heard this, what their reaction is. Let's start with this particular clip here on MSNBC, Joe Scarborough asking his legal commentator what she thinks.
Explain why no lawyer will ever let Donald Trump testify under oath, and why Donald Trump will never let his lawyer have him testify under oath.
Donald Trump is not capable of taking the witness stand and telling the truth. He's not capable of following any instructions he's given about what he can and can't testify to.
Ding,
and this clip, Joe, it's a great example of that, because Trump would, for instance, very likely be prohibited from talking about what he claims is the Civil Presidential Records Act that protects him at trial. Prosecutors would file a motion to exclude that because it's not true and it's not relevant.
So that's one legal commentator. There's another one as well who puts it even more bluntly than that.
Bradley Moss, so I guess Donald Trump's going to testify because he would never lie about that on a radio show.
Yeah, there's no way on earth Donald Trump is ever going to take the stand. His lawyers will throw their bodies in front of him before they ever let him get on that stand. The man's a walking perjury machine. He would never put himself in that position. But what would
So there you go, folks. I mean, it's interesting because, again, it's Donald Trump boldly saying something that he almost certainly has no intention of following through on. And even if he did, his attorneys would fight him tooth and nail and do everything in their power to prevent it from happening, because with Trump's stupidity and his corruption and his ego and his incoherence and his inconsistency, he would be fodder for cross-examination from a seasoned prosecutor like Jack Smith or anybody on his team. And Trump would almost certainly lie because the facts are not on his side. And again, there are pains and penalties associated with perjury. Now, he would also, of course, plead the fifth. If he has to take the stand, I imagine he will plead the fifth wherever and whenever he can, even though he famously said multiple times during his presidency and before, even when he was campaigning, that only cowards and liars, people who have something to hide, members of the mob, I think is another direct quote, would ever plead the fifth. And he, of course, in multiple depositions since then has pled the fifth many, many times, thus proving his hypocrisy. But yeah, it would be interesting to see Donald Trump be forced to testify under oath. I'm sure Jack Smith is salivating like, yes, you do that, Donald Trump. You push and bully your attorneys into getting you to testify on the stand. It would be an absolute disaster for Trump and his defense. And again, as entertaining as it may be, we will almost certainly never see it because he's running his mouth on conservative media, and that's one thing, but it's very different when he's sitting in the courtroom and all eyes, especially the eyes of the judge and the presiding judge and the attorneys are on him. And then, of course, he would look over to his left and see Jack Smith eyeing him like a shark, too. So you can almost be certain that Donald Trump will never testify, but it's funny to think what would happen if he did.